This is where we live. A humble forest dwelling nestled in the middle of a small nature reserve in Flanders. Flanders, for those who have no idea, is the northern part of a small Western European country called Belgium, between France and the Netherlands. It might not be the first country that comes to mind when thinking about living a slow and simple life off the grid, as its roads are often filled with traffic jams, and most people seem to choose a life in the rat race. Besides its beer and chocolates, Belgium is also known for its typical urban developments, where, if I would literally translate, they say the people here are born with a brick in their stomach, which is to say that most people are obsessed with building their own house. And people have been doing their very best here to make their dwellings looking according to their personal taste and definition of beauty. In my 3 decades on this earth, I witnessed a lot of changes in the landscape. Villages and more rural areas being developed, modern grey housing blocks rising like mushrooms. I remember the house where I grew up, surrounded by meadows, with horses and cows grazing, fields filled with dandelions. That now is all gone, sold for very high prices and replaced with these new, in my opinion, soulless buildings. Don't get me wrong, the brick in the stomach, on one hand, I believe, is a beautiful and natural thing. We humans have been building and crafting shelter for as long as history goes. But I think the way it's done in Belgium and in many more places on this earth is just illogical. Something is missing. There seems to be no connection to the land whatsoever. Here down the road, for instance, there was a house with a very big, beautiful cherry tree that gave a lot of delicious cherries. When it came for sale, the first thing the new owner did, you might hear me coming, was cutting down this cherry tree. And this is really not an exception. Most people seem to accept the idea that if you want to build, you have to start with a bare plot of land, tearing down everything on it, without taking any notes of how the place is already living and interacting in the broader landscape, let alone how to orient it and how to make use of natural features and resources that are already present, like beautiful trees that can give fruits and shades, or make up good building material. But instead of complaining about what I'm seeing and the things I'm not agreeing upon, I learned that there are other ways to approach housing, other ways to live, ways that make more sense to me. Sometimes it's not about starting from zero, but looking at what is already there and how it can be reused and revalued. I'm so grateful that for the last 6 years I've been able to live here and call this piece of land my home, inhabiting a 60-year-old cabin that once had a different purpose. In the 50s and 60s, it was quite common here for people to have like a holiday home. No big mansions, but people used to buy plots of land where they built small cabins and often dug big ponds to raise fish and also for swimming, creating these recreational spaces for their families and friends. when the couple that built this place for their 4 children to spend the holidays passed away, slowly the place became abandoned and no one came here anymore for over 13 years. And we were lucky enough to be gifted this kind of housing, as we both wanted to live this kind of way. In the permaculture philosophy, they say the first year you buy a property or you come at a property, you should not do anything on the land, but observe what's going on, getting to know how it behaves throughout the seasons. I guess it's fortunate that Stephen arrived here before I did. My enthusiasm sometimes can trick me into action that maybe later down the road I would regret. But so he did a wonderful job by just putting his tent here, between the thistles and the chupai weeds, to get to know the place and all its inhabitants. He observed the vegetation, the routes and rhythms of the animals and the elements that were here. The sun. Seeing and experiencing the place in different circumstances. To get to understand how wet it could be during the winter months, which spots were underwater, tracks of wildlife. Then he slowly started to clean the cabin, making it livable again according to his needs. Maybe you can imagine the state and smell of an abandoned chalet in the middle of a forest, as it was returning back to nature and became a palace for mice and rats. The orientation was good, facing south-southwest, looking out on the central overgrown garden space that used to be lawn, with wide raked sandy paths that Stephen later would turn into 2 circles, after clearing everything from brambles and other plants that had gone wild. And he set his intention here to create a place for devotion and connection, forming the basis for our permaculture garden, where we are able to grow a substantial amount of our food.
Hey Jackman.
One day, a tree that stood next to the cabin was on its way down. And Stephen told me that he went to a concert where he went praying for the tree, that everything would be safe. The next morning, he woke up very early, hours before his usual wake-up hour, and did his morning routine. When he was outside for his morning walk here on the land, he heard a cracking sound and he just saw the tree falling on the cabin. A little part of the roof where the chimney is was hit, but besides that there was no significant damage. I think this is such a beautiful example that shows how we, when we live more closely and aligned with our surroundings, we become more attuned and sensitive to the signs of the landscape, even when we might not always be aware of this. We never really did major renovations on the cabin, since we kind of always knew that this place would be a temporary home for us. But we fixed it up here and there with the means we had, replacing the windows with double-glazed reused windows, and also added an extra window because actually half of the cabin was very dark. In my previous video I shared also about some other buildings I did to upgrade our life here. I ponder a lot upon this, how temporary yet profound our imprints can be on a place, as I really came to understand what it means to be a steward of the land. We are not just random passengers. Everything is tied to something from the past, and we can choose to weave with and build further on this, instead of treating our surroundings like interchangeable commodities, and stripping them of all natural beauty and richness. And as much as we shape and transform the places we inhabit, maybe even more so, we are shaped and formed by those very places. So why not make them more beautiful again?